Well, I'm taping this and sending it to North Carolina so that people can, who have interest at least, can have a look at what I have to say about my dear departed friend of long ago, Raymond Filz. Raymond was from Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. I think his birthday was on the 7th of April, and it would have been in about 1942. He was almost a year older than me. And our folks were both members of the Christian Assembly in Kenosha. Most of you folks there are probably familiar with that because Ray continued to gather with the same group all of his life. I understand. I first would have met Ray in the Sunday school classes taught by my grandfather, Emil Schneider. Not the most interesting teacher, but we obediently answered the questions and engaged in the discussion, and this went on for several years. My family had moved to Racine, Kenosha area along about when I was 10 years old, would have been in about 53. Raymond would probably have been, he would have been a year older than me. And that's where we first sort of got to know each other. The assembly group also had picnics that they had annually, and at those kind of things I got to know Ray a little better because he was a good baseball player and I liked to play baseball. We had a good group of about 6 boys of the same age. There was Ray and I. There was my cousin Harvey Vetter. There was Eberhard Hobble, Herman Renshin, and John Partenheimer. Close to each other in age, so we had quite a cohort, and we got into mischief and trouble and all that, like boys often will, and had a good time. Our parents also chose to send many of us to a couple of Bible camps. The one at Riverside and the one in Lowry. Riverside was near Waupaca, Wisconsin, and the other one was near Lowry, Minnesota. We went there frequently, and during those weeks we got to know each other really well. Yet, because we weren't together a lot of the rest of the time, we'd see each other for a week or so every year and got to be good friends and didn't have all that time together where many friends kind of get tired of each other. So there was a bunch of other guys within that age group like Jim Trotzer, Jim Kaiser, Charles Rapp, and the illustrious Bob Erlandson. We got to be good friends. We had a good time. We communicated, sometimes wrote to each other, talked about the different girls that we were interested in, all kinds of unfortunate stuff that guys always kind of get interested in. The church group also had a lot of conferences. Once we were old enough that we could drive, we went to these places, because we learned stuff about the Bible and things like that, but also, let's face it, most of us were going to those conferences because we wanted to check out and meet all of the girls from assemblies in other parts of the country, and we certainly did that, and Ray did that along with all the rest of us. There were conferences in Chicago. The kind of long one we would go to was in Toronto. There were a few in New York, many in Chicago, some in Wausau, Wisconsin. And we went to all these places, so we stayed quite involved with that group. Ray and I, especially, and a few of the others, but mostly Ray and I, got very interested in automotive kinds of stuff. My father was a truck dealer in Racine, and Ray worked at Hubbard's Body Shop in Kenosha, where he learned a great deal about automotive stuff, developed, I guess, the trade he kept up throughout his entire life. He was quite an automotive artist. I remember the earliest car that he had was I think a 51 Nash Ambassador Big 6. He painted it a bright green color, fixed it up very nicely. We drove to a number of the conferences and other places in that car. Some years later, he put together a very thoroughly rebuilt 57 Oldsmobile, dark blue metallic. He filled in all of the chrome areas so it had no chrome on it. It looked very artistic, very fancy. It was a beautiful car. It was really cherry, as he would always tell us. When he was working on this car, he still used it for his general transportation. And I remember he had just a common cement block that he put behind the wheel so he had someplace to sit when he drove it. And it was kind of amusing when you looked in this car, you'd see Ray there sitting on a cement block but still able to drive his car. It was probably a little frightening to his mother, but I don't know if she ever even found out about that. And we traveled around with that car, later with the green, we traveled with the green Ambassador, and later with the blue Oldsmobile. That was the car he had when I probably last really saw Raymond. I don't think I've seen him for 50 years, and now I won't see him again. We were both very interested in automobiles, so we both got very interested in all types of auto racing, and we traveled many places, number of times to Indianapolis in 61, 63, 60, and 65, all the while arguing the merits of the American, old-fashioned American cars and the much more modern European type of cars. The American cars won the first 2 years, and then in 65, Jim Clark won the race going away, and I felt quite triumphant about that. Ray didn't like that. He called me a limey lover. He didn't think, he really disparaged the British cars, although, you know, design-wise, they have proven to be a lot better in the history of auto racing. And I think Ray kept up with the auto racing stuff when he moved down south, went to races in Charlotte and Atlanta and other places. We did a lot of that, went to drag races, national championships in Indianapolis and a lot of other places, argued about cars all the time. Ray liked General Motors cars, and I liked Chrysler products as well as European type of cars. Ray, I guess somebody told me that Ray liked Fords in his later years, and I don't know how that happened, and I was rather surprised when somebody told me that. But I never much talked to him about that. Ray's automotive artistry was very developed. He was a very good body man and made his cars look good. The painting was flawless, everything like that. Did the mechanical stuff real well too, and he had developed a trade and a skill, and he stayed with it all of his life. Unlike myself, who started out curing the insane, driving trucks, and then flying airplanes, and then driving buses. Never seemed to settle down very well. I often think of what Mark Twain used to say about himself as a young man, and I felt sort of the same way. You know, I would tell stories about my youth, and I would, like Mark Twain said, I would begin with, well, when I was a young man, studying for the gallows, etc. It was sort of like that. My parents probably felt that way. One time when Ray and I were sent to Chicago by my father, we were taking a truck to somebody there and driving my family car back. We took the truck to somebody in Chicago, and we were driving back when we got stopped by the police, and apparently there was something wrong with my dad's dealer plate on the car, and I probably smarted off to the police a little bit, and they got angry, and they put Ray and I in jail, where we stayed for about 3 or 4 hours. I wouldn't be surprised if that was unfortunately the only time that Raymond ever had, the cultural benefit of spending any time in jail. Where when they lock the door, you can't get out of there. We spent this time in the jail. I got into a few more arguments with the cops, and they kept us in there a little bit longer. The other prisoners told us they hadn't been fed for 2 days. I don't know if I really believe them, but they said so, and from what we hear about Chicago police, that's always very possible. This stuff continued. We had a couple other instances of interaction with the police. I remember one time we got stopped by a Tennessee state trooper when we were driving through Tennessee, and we thought we would pull the old trick that some people do. We pretended that we couldn't speak English, and we spoke German to each other. Ray spoke a different German than I did, but we tried to do that, and wouldn't you know, we ran into probably the only Tennessee state trooper there who was fluent in German, and he told us how ridiculously we were in good German, and gave me a ticket. We later, both of us attended the University of Wisconsin and went to some games here and there. I remember in 1962, the UW had a pretty good football team. Ray had predicted them that they would be the best team in the country early that season, and he was very close to correct. They lost the Rose Bowl game that year by about 12 or by about 5 points after coming back from a big deficit early in the game. They came back in a surprising way with quarterback Ron Vanderkellen and tight end Pat Richter almost won the game in the very end, but didn't. And Ray got some credit for very good prognostication. He always studied a lot of the sports sort of information that was available. Jim Kaiser will certainly remember how whenever we got a copy of a new Sports Illustrated, that was the first thing Ray would always say, "Give me the sports quiz." And we'd have to read the sports quiz to Ray, and we'd argue about answers and decide what was right. And he usually had a lot of that stuff down pretty well. He understood that sort of stuff. Another time, Ray was into the idea of getting a baseball at baseball games, or we went to a couple football games. One was a UW game in Madison, and when one of the field goals was kicked, Ray managed to get the ball and steal it and went home with it. The same thing happened about a year later when he and I successfully jumped the fence at Milwaukee County Stadium and saw a game of the Green Bay Packers, which the Packers won. And again at that game, somebody was kicking a field goal and Ray managed to steal the football. And on the way walking across the field after the game, he stopped and shook Vince Lombardi's hand, and he was quite pleased to do that. After Ray got married, and I didn't in the 1960s, and he was living down in Georgia and North Carolina, we didn't see each other again. I don't think I've seen him for about 50 years. The last time was at a Chicago conference where I saw Wanda and Ray's eldest son, although he was just a toddler, so he wouldn't remember either. That would have been the last time I ever saw Ray. A few times I called him over the years on the phone. Unfortunately, we just got into petty arguments again. We had one about the political virtues of Jesse Helms, and another a few years later about what Rush Limbaugh said that was true and what wasn't. Ray believing a certain amount of it, and I believing almost nothing of at all of it. I wish I could have come there for the memorial service. I would have liked to have seen everybody again. And car troubles and old age poverty sort of keep me here in Madison, Wisconsin, the town where I went to college and never grew up enough to ever leave. But I wish Ray's family well. Except for Wanda, I've never really met any of you, all of the relatives. I want you all to do well, and we can remember our friend Ray. He was a good fellow. He was kind and generous to everybody. He was smart, and he was a hard-working fellow. And I'm gonna miss him. I wish I'd have gotten down there to see him a year or two ago. Thanks a lot.